Thank you both for this film. As I mentioned in my intro, I just adore it and am excited to pick your brain about how it came to be. And to that end, diving right in, Harry, I wonder if you could start off by speaking about what brought you to this story, what the initial spark of inspiration was that let you know that you had to make a film about this type of relationship in particular, which is at once sort of hyper-specific in the sort of milieu that it's unfolding in, but also, I think, very universal in the love story, if you want to call it that, I guess, that we watch unfold between these two men, and specifically perhaps one man who's learning how to love himself.
Yeah, I think that the initial spark of inspiration is sort of kind of a dull spark in that I wanted to make a film about sumo wrestling for like 10 years, and then the pandemic happened, and suddenly the budget kind of skyrocketed from like 3 million to 40 million. Which obviously wasn't feasible for a first-time filmmaker. And so I thought, how else can I use wrestling in a film? And I then was sent this book by a woman called Evie Yates, who's at BBC Films, and the book actually doesn't have wrestling, but it's set in the 70s, but it's the same world of kind of kink and bikers, and I just found the like tone of the book totally fascinating in the way that it like shifted from sentence to sentence between like thick comedy and then sincerity. And I was like, both, you could both see the characters as like caricatures in a way, but then they also really moved me, and I thought that the book achieved a lot of that tone through first-person narration, and I thought it would be like an interesting challenge to try and work out how to kind of cross that tone into a film without using narration, how to do that visually, and yeah, I mean, it then took me like another 5 years because my writing process is sort of useless. So I said this last night, but I set it in ancient Rome. I moved the story setting to ancient Rome first, and then that didn't work, and so I moved it into a cruise ship, and then my producer Emma Norton, who's here somewhere, sort of told me to get a grip and stop fucking with the book. And so I then moved it back into the world of biking, but moved it to the present and made various other changes.
The casting of Harry Melling and Alex is so, having seen the film, it feels that it's hard to imagine anyone else in these roles because the performances are so specific and sort of attuned to who these characters are. And I wonder if, Harry, you could start by describing how you landed on this pair of performers for this pair of roles, and then I'll open that up to Alex to ask him about playing the role.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of finished writing it, and then as soon as I started speaking to our casting director, Callie Crawford, I knew that I wanted Harry to play Colin. I'd followed him in all these great performances, like his performance in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and in The Devil All the Time, where he played these characters who were kind of in some way beta or in some way marginalized, but he was always totally kind of captivating to watch. He has a sort of a like really interesting quality where there's this like charisma which isn't your typical male charisma, and I thought that's what I needed for Colin, and so he was the only choice for Colin, and luckily he said yes. And then I thought who would be interesting to play opposite him, and Alex was sort of my fifth choice, and and no, I had been watching Succession. I mean, I'd always been a fan of Alex's work, but I'd been watching specifically Succession at the time, and I thought that the way he asserted his status in Succession was fascinating, and in the kind of the kind of strategies used by the character and the way he performed them had a lot of like psychological complexity to them. It wasn't just about being like hotter than the Roys, and I thought that would be a really interesting combination in Ray, who on one level needs to be sort of 6'4" and whatever hot, and then but also needs to not needs to dominate Colin in ways which are both physical and psychological.
Alex, I'm so curious to hear from you about what was your way into this character, because I think it's I imagine that it's challenging to find a way into a person who is so by design opaque or perhaps enigmatic and unwilling to give of himself in terms of offering insight into his inner world, and yet you play him with such texture and such, even if we, the audience, can't access his inner world, we know it's happening, and we know that there's he is experiencing this relationship or this arrangement as vividly as Colin is. And I'm curious if you could just speak about, how you found your way in.
Well, it was, I think the prospect of playing a character who is so, like you said, enigmatic throughout the whole film was quite interesting. And the fact that he, at least on the surface, doesn't go on these emotional roller coaster where you have highs and lows and climactic moments. It's, I mean, there are some climactic moments, but emotionally, was quite intriguing to me when I first read it. I thought, well, you obviously don't want to play the characters like just one note throughout the film, but in this, like, in a way, like, not coming of age story, but for Colin to discover his sexuality and what he wants, to have someone so consistent, like Ray, who knows exactly what he wants throughout the film, and again, who's so closed off emotionally, was quite interesting. And then it was about finding these brief moments where there's maybe not a crack, but like something where you kind of, he lowers his guard a little bit. And I thought that was really interesting to kind of explore and find those brief moments. And I think it can never be more than like half a second, because I think then he pulls back. So going into it, I knew that I didn't really have a plan for when, I didn't map it out really, but I knew that I went into it excited to find those moments, because I thought, like, I think they're there somewhere, but I didn't know exactly where they would be. It was, and that's also part of the reason it was so much fun shooting those scenes with Harry, because we didn't really rehearse much. We didn't know each other going into it. We met 2 days before we started shooting the film, rehearsing the wrestling scene. That was literally our first meeting. And we got to know each other very well. But it was fun to kind of throw ourselves into that relationship, and then discovering those little moments where I'm in control, but then for maybe a brief, split second, there's a vulnerability there, and a hint of a vulnerability at least. That was really, really fun.
And did you, the two of you or the three of you, perhaps have conversations about the sort of unspoken communication between these two men? Because I think, there's so much of what goes on between them is left unsaid or unarticulated, and yet it plays out on the screen in the sort of minutia of facial expressions and physicality. And was it an experimental process? Was there an element of and I want to ask both of you this, like, how did you tease out that sort of nonverbal chemistry?
We didn't do it at all. We really didn't. It was, on some projects, you need to kind of intellectualize it and really sit and discuss it. But on this, I think we all felt like we just wanted to throw ourselves in it. And again, we didn't know each other at all. I was very excited to work with Harry. I thought he was a fantastic actor. So, but I never reached out in prep. Neither did he. I guess none of us felt the need to kind of like discuss this relationship. It was so clear on the page in the script what it was, but then again, with an opportunity to explore and discover new things. But I didn't really feel the need to sit with Harry and discuss it because he's such an incredible and exciting actor to work with. And I felt that the less we talk about it, the better, the more exciting the discovery in front of camera will be. So we spent time, we hung out, but like we didn't really talk about, this scene we're shooting on Monday, what are your thoughts on that? And what does this mean to you? And where's your character coming from? We kind of wanted to wait till the camera was rolling.
And Harry, was this on your mind in the scripting process, sort of how you would go about directing actors in these kinds of dynamics?
I mean, to an extent, in that, some of the nonverbal communication was probably written into the script. But I kind of agree with Alex. I think that for me, part of the exciting thing about the shoot is not trying to pin exactly what you're going to do before the facts, or even I would never really say to an actor like, can you give him this kind of look at this moment, because I'd rather from take to take just see what happens initially and then tweak it, but tweak it in quite a general way so that there's a sort of live quality. I don't really do much directing really when we're on set. I just sort of chuck it over to these guys.
No, but you do. But I think you're curious to see what happens in front of camera, and then, but without going in, like you said, without giving us, restraining us, or telling like you should do this, or this is what I want out of the scene. It's kind of an open curiosity to be like, all right, let's see what happens, and then it feels like something might inspire Harry to be like, oh, come up and whisper something to Harry or to me, and be like, well, that was kind of cool. Play with that, or try go in this direction, and those are the most fun days on a set, when you kind of have an idea of in your head how you think the scene would play out, and then at the end of the day, you're like, well, that took a very different turn, and I didn't expect that, but that was exhilarating.
You, Harry, you mentioned that the tone of the novel was something that you found really interesting and sort of to be a compelling challenge. And I think the tone that you achieve in the film, or sort of the tonal gradations that you get at in the film, shifting in sort of surprising ways between comedy and pathos and real feeling, it's just incredibly deft, I think, the way that you move through these registers, and you lean heavily into the awkwardness of some of these moments without ever feeling like we're watching a cringe comedy. It's really, I think it's a real achievement, and I wonder if you could speak about how you thought about tone as you were approaching the project, both sort of overall, but also in the actual making of it.
Yeah, I think it was interestingly when we were sending the script out to people beforehand, financiers and that kind of thing, the question which always came back was like, how's the tone going to work? And I never really had a good answer for them because I sort of always had an idea of how the tone would work for me, but I couldn't articulate it, and I probably won't articulate it well now. But I think that for me, like when you're dealing with subject matter which might like alienate a portion of the audience, so say you're in this case dealing with like BDSM, which not everyone's familiar with, then you have kind of multiple approaches, but two approaches might be like to make the sort of Hanukkah version, which would be very interesting, but like might alienate more of the audience, or you can kind of like sugar the pill with different tones, with like comedy and syrupy romance, as well as like the more kind of spicy stuff. And when we were shooting, I was conscious to try and create like the bandwidth to play with tone in the edit, so to make sure that we had comedy moments which felt like they were maybe pushing too far comparative to what we'd shot before, in case we needed a moment like that in the edit, and to also make sure that we had like enough emotional weight there. And so it became about like fine-tuning it in the edit, because I think there's certain points in the story, we had to like take out comedy at quite a lot of moments because sometimes you want to sit in a more serious space for a bit when you're kind of trying to achieve a certain feeling. So yeah, it was kind of edit tweaking, I think.
I want to open it up to the audience. We have a few minutes for some audience questions. I know that we have some mics that will come around. If you have a question, just raise your hand and keep it up until the mic comes. I think I see a hand. Could you raise it? Yes, the mic will come. Oh, the mic's coming on this side.
I heard that there were, hi, big fan of Alex, obviously, and
Thank you.
now. I hope, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I heard there was edits from Cannes. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like how content-wise, you said, I read that it went down upon after that.
Yeah, I think that's internet misinformation, I believe.
Oh, sorry, then I shouldn't have asked that.
No, you're right. No, I mean, I think maybe what you're talking about is there was an article about having cut out some like graphic stuff.
Okay, that's what I must have read, yeah.
And it wasn't a case of after Cannes, but there was it was just that we shot. I mean, I can tell you specifically, we shot like a like super close up of like a knob end, and it was a good example of the tone thing, where like I really liked the shot, and like the Prince Albert seeing it on a screen like this would be hilarious, but it was too much. It was in the alley scene, and it provided a laugh when you wanted the audience to be holding their breath, and so that was I think that's what some people have now written about someone said the other day, like, release the Skarsgård cut, because but yeah,
Christmas special. Yeah.
Some good DVD extras on this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
I see a hand right here in the center. If you could raise it just higher so the mic, yep.
Hi, I really enjoyed this, and I want to talk about the incorporation of his parents, and I thought that added such an interesting dynamic to an already interesting dynamic. So can you tell us about how you wrote those characters and what you wanted that relationship to add to the rest of the film?
Yeah, I think I thought it was the mum is like very loosely like my mum in that my mum, when I came out, she had like, I'd go home and I'd find that she had like cut out picture of a hot guy from a magazine, and and it would always be like a very famous person who'd just put it on my bed and be like, date ? And I liked the idea of starting at a point of like demonstrative acceptance from parents about a queer kid, because obviously usually the arc is the inverse. Usually you start from, in film history it tends to be you start from a point of objection, and then the parents come around to it. And I thought it was interesting to do the reverse, where you have these parents who are kind of so happy that their kid's gay, and then and then when he starts exploring his desire in a way which doesn't match their expectations of what like desire or romance should look like, then they object. And I didn't want the audience to have like a clear-cut answer as to whether the parents were kind of, right to object or not right to object. I think there's a case for both arguments. There's an argument that Ray might not be great for Colin's progression, but then Colin certainly thinks he is, and I think you can argue that they are projecting what they think a kind of happy romantic life looks like onto Colin.
I have to say one of the elements of the film that was most moving to me was the moment or sort of process of Colin realizing, well, my parents don't necessarily know what's best for me. They love me and they want the best for me, but maybe I have to find that out for myself. Was this a change from the novel? I'm curious, because since you did update the setting, did you transform the characters of the parents or their involvement at all?
Yeah, completely. In the novel, the parents are the kind of what I just described, the opposite, in that, well, initially, I mean, Colin doesn't come out. The book takes place over like 20 years, and he sort of comes out 18 years in, and he comes out while they're cooking Christmas dinner, and the mum says like something. She makes like a comment about Brussels sprouts, and they never speak about it again. So it's the classic like swept under the carpet version. And I thought that in updating the story to the present day, having that version of parents would be dull, because it, certainly in the UK, and I know that like, right now it's still a very like scary time for queer people in the UK, but lots of parents, particularly like suburban Bromley parents, are totally fine with their kids being gay, and so I thought it would be dull to have that kind of tropey version of the parents in a story set in the kind of contemporary times.
I think we can take one more question. I see a hand right here in the sort of middle. Yep.
Thank you. Hi. Insane movie, really good, really funny, and also really sexy and sensual, which is like really interesting in a genre that is like about romantic comedies, but it's rarely sensual and sexual. And I was wondering how you came to like in a genre and redefine it in some sense, like adding sex and also like redefining like the story structure. And I was wondering like what's your take on romantic comedies and the genre in general? And do you think it's gonna change? Like, do you think it has more potential? Do you think even your movie is a romantic comedy? And yeah, lovely movie. Thank you.
We want to call it a dom-com.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Slightly forgotten. The romantic comedies, yes. Romantic comedies, sex. So the sex was like, it was just a fundamental part of the story, because the world was about kink and transgressive sex, and I thought to like not include sex, or even to include sex in kind of an elliptical fashion, would be to like cast a judgment on the sex from like me, the kind of author. And I wanted to leave the judgment to the audience to be, whether they find it hot or like repulsive or scary. I wanted the audience to be able to make up their own minds, and hopefully to go on a journey with the sex as they're watching it. And I sort of didn't think about it as a romantic comedy when I was writing it. then a producer kind of said, "Oh, you've got some tropes in there," and then I realized that I did. So like, you know, the parents' dinner and the day off, and there are definitely things which come from that like tradition. And I think what was probably generating that was I was thinking about like how a very atypical relationship would like chafe against the kind of traditions of romance in film. And so obviously going to have dinner with someone's parents when you like refuse to talk about your backstory, your personal history, will make for an awkward dinner. And I like that. Yeah, I liked seeing how their relationship kind of butted heads with romantic comedy conventions.
I'm sorry to say that we are out of time, but please join me again in thanking Harry and Alex.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.